Orchestra. In this practice video, we're going to go over how our violin and viola players put on their shoulder rest. Cellos and basses, this doesn't apply to you, so you can just skip ahead to the next video. Violins and violas, the purpose of our shoulder rest is to take up this extra space underneath our instrument so that when we hold our instrument properly, we can actually hold it with no hands and we don't have any tension in our shoulder. If I don't have a shoulder rest on my instrument, you see I have all this extra space down here. So if I don't have a shoulder rest, my only option is to shrug up my shoulder to take up that extra space. And then that means I'm playing like this. And over time, you can develop a lot of shoulder pain. So sometimes orchestra students tell me that they don't like their shoulder rest or they think it's really uncomfortable. And to be honest, it's a little awkward at first. And if you give it a couple of weeks, you'll eventually get used to it. Now, if you go weeks and weeks and it still feels really weird, that just means you have the wrong kind of shoulder rest for you. There's many different kinds and we can find one that fits best for you. All right, so let's go over the two most common types of shoulder rests and how to put them on your instrument. There are two basic types of shoulder rests for violin and viola players. The first kind is a sponge, and this isn't your regular dishwashing sponge. It's pretty firm and it has a pretty specific shape. The other kind is what I call the fancy kind of shoulder rest. It could look like this or like this. It's usually metal or plastic with some foam on it. Now, either kind of shoulder rest is perfectly fine. It just depends on what you find most comfortable. We're going to start with putting our sponge shoulder rest on. And to put this on, we actually need 2 rubber bands. We're going to learn how to put the rubber bands on once, and then you can actually leave these on your instrument all the time, and then just take your sponge on and off when you're playing or putting your instrument away. To put on our rubber bands, first of all, make sure you start with some really good thick rubber bands so they really hold your sponge in place. I'm going to take my first one and I'm going to hook it down to this bottom corner. And I'm going to draw it across the bottom of my instrument. And it's going to go on this side of this end button down here. So I drew it diagonally across and went to the opposite side of the end button. Now I'm just going to do the exact same thing with the other rubber band. So I'll hook it on the other side, draw it across over my chin rest, and then again, I'm on the other side of this end button. This will help hold those rubber bands in place so they don't fall off. Here's what it looks like on the front. You just want to make sure this rubber band isn't over your chin rest because that can get uncomfortable. And then on the back, we have this nice V shape. To put our sponge on then, we need to make sure we get the right side down on our instrument. Our sponge has a flat side and a curvy side. We want the flat side to touch the instrument. And then there's usually a shorter side and a taller side. The tall side needs to go in the center of our collarbone when we flip our instrument over. So to make sure that we have it in the right place, I'm going to line it up on the opposite side of my chin rest. So you can see I have my chin rest over here, and the taller, fatter side of my sponge is on the opposite side. Then to put it on, all I do is lift up my rubber bands and tuck the sponge underneath. Then just kind of slide it down to the bottom of your instrument to make sure it's nice and secure. Now remember, every time you put your instrument in your case, you need to take your sponge off. If you just leave this on and close your case, you will crush your instrument. So the sponge comes off, but you can leave the rubber bands on to save yourself some time. All right, next we're going to do the fancy kind. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to take the rubber bands off. Again, sponge shoulder rest people, you can just leave those on. With the fancy kind, there's usually a little bit of setup the first time you put it on. So these are typically adjustable so they can fit your instrument. So if you can tell on this one, there's different holes that these feet could screw into. If your shoulder rest is slipping off your instrument all the time, or maybe it's really difficult to put on, you might just need to have me adjust it to the correct size. So see me in class if you need help with it. Fancy shoulder rests have these little feet, and you need to make sure that they're turned so that the feet will hook in. So if these rotate, make sure you have them twisted so your hooks go in. Usually these are curvy. So you see this one has a little bit of a curve to it. And we want to make sure that we end up with a frowny face and not a smiley face. So if you have a curve in your shoulder rest, make sure that it's turned to a frown. That's the way it's designed to be the most comfortable. When I put this on my instrument, it would be a lot easier if I could put this in my lap. That's what I recommend doing, is sitting in a chair and putting it down in your lap. All we're going to do is make sure we have our feet turned in. I'm going to get one of them kind of hooked on Then hook the other one in place, and then just push it up one side at a time until it's nice and snug. And you usually want this kind of straight across. You don't want like one real funny angle. So straight across is going to be generally the most comfortable. Then just check to make sure that it's on there nice and snug. All right, that's how you put on your violin or viola shoulder rest.